Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Hello and a warm welcome to this week's edition of Invest Africa. I'm Natasha Jacobs. Now, Namibia has been described as one of Africa's most vibrant and successful sovereign states, with its capital city of Windhoek dubbed as the cleanest city in Africa, serving as the country's economic centre. The city is positioning itself as an investment destination for multinationals looking to expand their business. Let's take a look.
Windhoek, Namibia's capital city, contributes about 43% of the country's GDP, with a population of about 330,000 people. Due to Windhoek's economic stability, the city seems to be an investment destination for multinationals looking to expand their business. Windhoek is said to be the center of both government and commerce. Grant Murray, director at Swakop Uranium, says Windhoek is a city that works for all investors and business.
The city of Windhoek, as everybody knows, is obviously the capital of the country. It's situated inland, about 350 kilometers from the coast. All the decisions are made in Windhoek, and obviously whenever negotiations are done with stakeholders such as central government, it's all done in Windhoek. So I'd regard Windhoek as the hub of all the investment decisions that are made within the country. And certainly when we're negotiating to bring investment into the country, it's done in Windhoek.
Due to the city's innovative reuse of water, the city of Windhoek was chosen to host the 9th International Water Association's Conference on Water Reuse. This conference will see 450 international scientists debate water reuse issues between October the 27th to the 31st, 2013. Dubbed as Africa's cleanest city, Windhoek serves as a commercial and industrial centre with a solid and reliable infrastructure, easing the cost of doing business for investors. Philani Nyalunga, CNBC Africa, Johannesburg.
Now, before we start off things here in studio and introduce my guests, earlier today I had a chat with Robert Arab, partner at KPMG Namibia, about the investment landscape of the city of Windhoek, and this is what he had to say.
We've got quite a very skinny population size. So the focal point for Windhoek currently at the moment is to look at the manufacturing and industrial markets, in the sense that we are going to get to a point where we can be next exporters of of manufactured products, because the consumer markets industry, for example, because of the very few numbers, does not really have much strength to stand on here in Windhoek. Apart from that, one of the critical areas that the city of Windhoek has been prioritizing is really to look on the tourism sector and to really market Windhoek as one of the key destinations in the sub-Saharan tourism industry. So that really is our biggest sort of selling point from a city perspective here in Windhoek.
Now, Robert, for both you need infrastructure, and again, back to the numbers, limited infrastructure in Windhoek. I mean, you guys are situated, in a dip between the mountains. Is the city of Windhoek actively investing money to build this infrastructure? Because manufacturing needs a manufacturing base to start from.
That's quite right. One of the key points that came through in the 2013-2014 budget of the city of Windhoek was the basically development and deployment of service land. Because as much as you're saying we're sitting in one small valley, I think the valley is quite saturated, and with the increased immigration or urbanization into the city, as well as the need for more property or land to be able to do projects such as the manufacturing projects that we're talking about, the city needs to expand its boundaries. So yes, I think there is the thinking in the right direction in terms of making available the resources to be able to enable the manufacturing market to develop and set itself up.
Now, Robert, Namibia is competing, Windhoek's competing with, its fellow sister cities in the SADC region. What is the unique selling point for the city of Windhoek?
Okay. I think if you've been to Windhoek, you will definitely, undoubtedly also agree with me that this is probably the most peaceful, organized and clean cities. That in itself has been a selling point. I think the low crime rate together with the ease of being able to do business in Namibia, or specifically in Windhoek, has really been a plus. And I mean, if you even look at the global ease of doing business survey of 2012, you find Windhoek is sitting in 87th, which is not too bad if you compare it with the other big economies like Russia, Brazil, and even Lagos. It's sitting about 112th, 130th, and 131st on that ranking. So it is relatively easy to do business. It's relatively safe. And it is relatively also, I suppose, a very transparent and economically viable place to be able to do business.
Robert Arab from KPMG Namibia. Now joining me in the studio to explore the investment case for the city of Windhoek is Sithole Manga, the CEO of the South African Cities Network, and Dion Nieuwoud, executive at Dulux Africa. Gentlemen, welcome. Sithole, I'm going to kick off with you. We heard phrases like cleanest city in Africa, great sovereign state, peaceful. What makes for a successful city, and does the city of Windhoek live up to these requirements, especially from a South African cities network?
No, look, Windhoek is in fact one of the better competing or competitive cities in the SADC region. The indicators that were mentioned that make Windhoek competitive, the cleanest, those things do matter. But I think also what matters is the extent to which any city can be able to drive economic development and thus become competitive. The biggest indicator with which it is easy to judge whether a city is growing and therefore lending itself to competitiveness is the extent to which that particular municipality is approving construction and land rights and all of those things. I mean, it's a very important factor because it easily indicates how many businesses are setting up office in your specific city. So if you were to compare, then I mean, I think you'll be able to say to what extent is Windhoek more competitive than any other city in the Southern African region.
Now, Dion, Dulux is one of the businesses that has set up shop in Windhoek. Why was Windhoek the expansion destination of choice for the subsidiary, and why not just, you know, import and export from South Africa?
Windhoek is unique that it's closely aligned with the South African market, and it matches our brand very well in terms of LSM groupings. The other opportunity of Windhoek is because Windhoek offers economies of scale for anyone that want to enter the market, because more than 50% of the economic activity for Namibia
is
in any case situated right in Windhoek. So for a company to branch out in Africa, Windhoek is a unique opportunity to learn and to grow and to understand how the African markets work.
Now, Sithole, you need a conducive environment, and that comes back to the municipality and it comes back to the government. Now, the central government has actively pursued a policy of import substitution, considering the fact that 80% of their goods are coming from South Africa. So these incentives to create more environments for businesses to set up shop and not to import or export, is this the right incentives to create competitive advantage?
It's one of the many. I mean, just listening to the point that was being made there, the fact that Windhoek has at least 50% of its population in one place, I mean, it clearly indicates to you the extent to which there is density around one city. If you were to compare Windhoek with any South African city, it will be East London, the Buffalo City.
Absolutely, it's tiny in comparison.
They have more or less the same figures, they're spending more or less the same budgets, they have the same sets of challenges, except that East London in the South African context is much smaller compared to the, let's say, the top 8 or the top 9 municipalities. And I think the advantage that you have in Windhoek is that, I think, as was the clip says, most decisions are taken in Windhoek, so which means all the decision makers are seated in Windhoek. So the ease with which decision making just by mere physical presence takes place is relatively easy compared to any of our municipalities in South Africa, or in some of the SADC municipalities anyway. So
it's cutting out the red tape, and he mentioned ease. Now let's talk about the ease of doing business index that the World Bank released. Namibia is sitting at position number 87. It's dropped 6 places from the previous year. It was at 81. What was the experience of setting up shop in Windhoek? You just spoke about, you know, the ease of setting up and dealing with regulation compared to some of the other SADC and sub-Saharan countries that Dulux has operations in.
Yeah, obviously Namibia is part of a SADC group, which makes duties a lot easier. A lot of the regulations and policies is closely aligned with South Africa as well. So basically practices that you apply in South Africa can easily be transferred into the Namibian market.
Now, he talked about the relation with South Africa. We know Namibia became independent from South Africa in 1990, but it is a melting pot of different cultures. We have a strong German influence historically, the South African ties. We also have a variety of local indigenous cultures. When it comes to doing business, how do you navigate this landscape when it is this vast melting pot and people have different ways of doing things?
Well, again, I mean, there's not much of a difference between how Namibia has evolved as a country politically and how South Africa has evolved. In fact, way back when Namibia was still a colonial country and at some point controlled and managed by South Africa, it was all because of a United Nations type of resolution on how the country will be governed. But the evolution from that type of a system into a democracy has been more or less the same across the countries. And I think, as you say, the cultures are really much the same. There's a lot of exchange that takes place through organizations such as the GIZ. The ministries exchange a lot, so there isn't much of a difference really.
Let's talk about doing business. And he mentioned, you know, culturally it's pretty much aligned and strong South African ties, but it is still a different country. Dulux is a multinational. When you set up shop in territories outside your main base, how do you adapt your business strategy to suit the market?
Yeah, you've got to localize whatever you do. You still got to localize and understand the market, do proper segmentation, and apply the South African learning and even learnings from other African countries and localize it in that market and to make it applicable for that market in order to boost your brand.
Now, Sithole, how important is political stability in being a high-ranking and successful city on the African continent?
It's extremely important. No investor will ever invest in an environment where there is instability because the investment is at risk from day one. So political security, stability, but I think stability of the social environment as well. If you've got good labor relations, but the type of labor relations that protect both the employer and the employees, and in this instance the investor and those to whom the investment is going to be flowing through, I mean, is quite important. You can never negate that. Is
Namibia getting this right? Is Windhoek getting this right?
Well, Namibia is generally a very stable country. I don't think since democracy you've had anything negative in terms of news that Namibia has done. So it's generally, I think, considered a very stable investment environment.
Now, Dion, he mentioned social cohesion and the aspects that go with that. Namibia sits with an unemployment rate of 51.2%, and given the population, that's a massive amount. And also 70% of local businesses are only limited to SMEs. In your opinion and from your business perspective, how do you take SMEs to the next level to become bigger contributors to GDP and also to empower local people on the ground?
I think there's got to be a degree of entrepreneurship where you develop local people, and even in regulatory rules in Namibia, I mean, although they become a lot more relaxed in secondments of expats, they in a way protect their local population. And as a company, we are committed towards training and development of people, and to be fully aligned with what they've got in mind.
He mentioned building up a culture of entrepreneurship, but you need innovation as well. And again, 330,000 people in the capital, very sparsely populated. How do you be innovative and entrepreneurial in such a small community?
I think you must not think that the challenges in Namibia are in themselves a problem. I mean, here's an opportunity for a company like Dulux, I mean, producing what they produce using less carbon. I mean, there's a great opportunity in Namibia utilizing solar and other means of production in such a manner that they reduce carbon emission will be a great opportunity, and that will certainly propel them into a very competitive company when it comes to the economic foundation of a green economy.